Hi, welcome back. How are you all doing? I'm well. Let's talk about Zero Escape. I don't want to spend a lengthy time preambling this. We all know what we're here for, and if you don't, real quick, I made a video before this one on Danganronpa, trying to figure out the creative influences and ideas that Kazutaka Kodaka and Kotaro Uchikoshi brought into their latest project, The 100 Line, Last Defense Academy. It's a game I really like enough that I'm dedicating the 3 months of my life to piecing it together. Last month, we discussed Kodaka's vision, his artistic goals with his series, what he's bringing to the table, but before we can truly unpack 100 Line for purposes of this video series, we must unpack Zero Escape first. Now, this may be sampling bias here, but I feel like of the 3 properties I'm discussing this summer, Zero Escape is the least culturally notable, the most niche, a strange trio of escape room murder games featuring a cast of 9 absolute freaks and Sean. The games are strange beasts on the face of things. There is no way to get a good ending out of them in a first pass through, but the main mechanic is instead going through multiple paths, collecting valuable information, and as a diegetic function of the game itself, crossing over that information to other timelines to solve puzzles and mysteries you'd otherwise never be able to. It's what we call in the biz, neat. Uchikoshi, I believe, is better known for AI The Somnium Files, a game I have every intention of one day playing, but I will not be discussing here. As with last month, this isn't an act of malice or derision, I just haven't gotten to it, and Zero Escape is in many ways the central element Uchikoshi is re-examining in 100 Line, in that while every game of his that I'm aware of does the big branching pathways with endings that you can only get by in-game save scumming your choices, Zero Escape has an embedded cast of characters all trapped in a murderous escape room situation with some deeper significance as to why they're here, which is a shared trait with 100 Line to some extent. So, fine. Also, I'm sorry that I haven't gotten to AI The Somnium Files, okay? So, as I did last month, I want to look at this trilogy of bizarre games that a friend of the channel, St. Robbery, described to me as, quote, autism death simulator. I know now that maybe some of you are upset that the last video just didn't ever talk about 100 Line, but in keeping with the sensibilities of the lead developers, I've decided to tie everything together at the very end, which is to say, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors is Uchikoshi at his most concise in this trilogy, which does suck for some people. I mean, look at this flowchart of branching story paths. Oh no, the game loop is simple, almost rudimentary. You are this guy, Junpei, trapped on seemingly a big boat with 8 other strangers. They're all tagged with death bracelets and told to use digital routes to open doors and then solve escape rooms that lead to more doors. The surviving people who get to the number 9 door can get out. Anyone left behind is left behind for good. It's like learning about math under threat of death. Cool. Anyway, everyone here is also kind of a chronic info dumper, a thing that gets memed on pretty consistently in the fan base, so I've been told. I've really only been allowed by my friend to look around on fan stuff this month, and I haven't had spare time since January, arguably, so fuck me, I guess. That being said, I did look around to try and find the clip of Akane in the walk-in freezer, stopping everything so we could have a chat about Ice 9. You know, the fictional material from Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle book that made me cry as a kitten. Lotus yaps at you about morphic fields, a pseudoscience penned by Rupert Sheldrake. There are conspiracy theories about Amon-Ra, a realization that this escape game is taking place on the sister ship of the Titanic, the Gigantic, which is also a rumor about the HMHS Britannic, and not a real thing. Honestly, the entire game is autistic people mostly talking to you about pseudoscience and rumors and shit like that. Bad game, unrealistic, etc., whatever. The joy in this game is that amid all of these bizarre theories and wild tangents, something is true, in this universe at least, and it is the centerpiece of the game's conceit. Despite it being introduced to Junpei by Lotus, a horrible bitch who's rude and mean and 40. I'll give you all a moment to recover from the fact that there's a 40-year-old woman in your video game. It's okay. Okay, so Uchikoshi has decided to canonize morphic fields of all things. The thing that the woman who's mean to you and is, again, and I apologize for reminding you, 40, said. So, okay, let's talk about this really quick. Uchikoshi has some hangups. That's fine. It's in a weird way kind of worse than Kodaka in that Uchikoshi does have a bit of shame around it. So when we get to some of the worst things Sigma says in VLR to say nothing about the things he says in ZTD. It's just way more embarrassing and weird and shameful than Kodaka's revelation of filth, but that's okay. If I lived to be 40 and were human and I ended up looking like Lotus, I would personally thank my lucky stars forever, but it's okay because she's such a bitch. Look at her be rude to people and kind of self-interested and say that we should leave the guy behind to die that offered to stay behind to die. Fucked up. Problematic woman alert. What were we talking about? If the storytelling of Danganronpa feels long-winded, forcibly withholding big reveals until the very ass end of the story, Zero Escape as a series follows suit, but in kind of a freak way for sickos. Contrary to the other half of this equation, Zero Escape chops up big reveals into puzzle pieces that you have to wind through multiple fail states of the game to piece together, or, more accurately, to see them get put together by the end. This isn't a criticism of the series by any means. It's twisty, bizarre fun, and it's fun in a really clear, put-together way here in 999, where the game is at its most concise. See, all of these rumors and pseudosciences aren't here just because the writer needed to info dump about some weird shit he read up on, or at least not necessarily, but they are all here to get you and Junpei more specifically into the mindset of thinking about the central conceit of the series. It's clever in the sense that you're sitting among a bunch of unreasonable things, like you're playing a murder mystery, but the culprit is Rupert Sheldrake, even though you were sure it was going to be Morgan Robertson, author of Futility.
I was just thinking about futility.
Huh?
Let me put an odd comparison. I've been playing out the development builds for Silverstone, a furry VN by Team Silverstrides. It's been pretty good, fitting very comfortably in the intrigue and horror environs of other VNs I'm into, and may be writing myself depending on whether or not you have control over my financial future and in what way. And while this is in no way a dig against Silverstone, there is a difference between them that I think runs pretty deep. See, Silverstone, even this early in development, entrusts a lot of how the story unfolds into each path because, barring future stuff I don't know, the game is built to make each path through it weighty and satisfying in the event that someone playing it was doing so for a specific storyline. This isn't bad writing or anything, far be it for me to say so. Again, my own FEN does the same thing, as does two of my favorite other FENs. Wow, it's a trapping of a lot of visual novel storytelling, and none of this is a criticism. Try out Silverstone, it's been fun, and they have an extremely bangable monster in it. You misheard me. That all being said, this is something Zero Escape is not beholden to, because none of these endings really hold the burden of needing to be independently satisfying, and this is where Uchikoshi's trick starts to come together. Instead of a distancing away from a trite Golden Path ending, Uchikoshi puts a Golden Path into the series, but makes you work for it. Some of these endings can just be refusing to let your girlfriend info dump about Ice 9 to you, and now you're going to get stabbed to death, and that is, for the record, a pleasant, novel twist on the branching path visual novel. It doesn't inherently make one better than the other by any means, but it is emblematic of Uchikoshi's approach to the series. There is a kind of heavy focus on mechanics here that is less pronounced in Kodaka's work, which I think is one of the necessary components to why they work so well together. It is also why some of the dialogue and character writing in general can be a bit of a mixed bag here. Look, let me be clear. I adore this series. I think they are bizarre brain teasers of games, but Uchikoshi doesn't really rise to the meteoric extreme Kodaka does with his cast of perverts. At least not all the time. And more than that, the context of the series is a little bit antagonistic to bawdy camp freaks. Like, let's face it, baseline Danganronpa is very Lord of the Flies forward. It's maximalist Lord of the Flies. You get it? The games are all structured for maximum impact to get these kids to ruin each other's lives. In contrast, Zero Escape is mostly adults in the cast, college kids, grown-ups with jobs, the oldest woman ever seen before in anime, so the vibe is inherently more serious, and the cast's relative immaturity isn't really played against them like in Danganronpa, so when they do act like idiots or perverts, it does stick out more. Like Seven insulting Lotus for being old feels insane to me.
下ネタがやりづらい。
Shush, please. Let me handle this one. All of this is to say that while at times Zero Escape feels wildly immature, and that immaturity will only become more pronounced once we get deeper into the series, the game as a whole kind of overcomes a lot to get us there. I've said on stream that every Zero Escape game has this moment where you feel like you're playing the dumbest game ever, only for the big reveal to pull everything together in a way that is, in my humble opinion, the polar opposite of Danganronpa, where a Danganronpa ending feels sickening and mean-spirited to you directly and is weathered by the larger-than-life characters. Zero Escape goes for sincerity at the end of the day. Minus the ninth man, the golden root of every one of these games somehow ends with all of the players surviving, and while 999 specifically is the most consistent and solid of the trilogy, I think that the sequels do a lot to complicate the structure they've inherited. Let me explain. So 999 was made with the understanding that it could very well be a self-contained game, and as a result is a mostly fully complete story with a wacky cliffhanger at the end, with everyone running into the mummy that was supposed to be a red herring. Whoops! Alice is real and naked and hot! How grand! The game also concludes with a hunt for Akane and Santa, who fled from the facility before the... oh, what was that? Oh, right. Okay, so... again, real quick, Locke, roll back the chapter title. One last thing about the games that are essentially inherited into the sequels is that a lot of the structure around it is establishing a clear idea of where you are and why you're here, only to pull that premise fully apart. You start 999 in a room that's flooding with ocean water because you're on a sinking ship that looks exactly like the Titanic. An impossibility, obviously. This is why 7 brings up the Gigantic, the fictional sister vessel of the Titanic. It's a fair enough deduction from the inside out. If we also assume that the Gigantic is real and was the same size and has the same layout as the Titanic, only to reveal later that the fake-out story about Alice, the mummified corpse of Amun-Ra, frozen in Kurt Vonnegut's Ice 9 and kept in a coffin that looks like the earthquake protection bed from Tahir and Shot, is seemingly real. There she is. Hi, girl, and also that you're definitely not on a ship, but in the middle of the desert in a facility designed to mimic the interior of the Titanic. Wow, what you believe to be the case in these games is often not the case. Okay, we can go back to the next chapter. I'm sorry to cause you trouble. Anyway, the game concludes with Junpei and the others pursuing Akane and Junpei and the others pursuing Akane and Santa with Ace tied up in the trunk because he's evil. The next game, Virtue's Last Reward, seemingly takes place with a mostly new cast of characters in a different situation, with a different circumstance, a different kind of game. There's a fucked up cyber bunny here. We have diverged ever so slightly from the direction of things. You are now Sigma, the world's dumbest smart man, and the entire premise of this game is, on paper, the prisoner's dilemma. Now, here's where I want to pause and dig in. 999 is a game kind of centered around the idea of the morphogenetic field, from Sheldrake's hot takes becoming a real thing that people can tap into. But to say that VLR is somehow also about the prisoner's dilemma in the same way feels wrong, because this is where the series starts to make a transition from establishing a premise into application. One of the more clever approaches, as it would get tedious fast if the game just hard redid the same thing, teaching Sigma from first principles about morphic fields, especially with how long VLR is. I mean, God, look at this new flowchart. I don't know, look at this beast. Instead, he's getting a crash course from someone who apparently already knows about it, and also, Clover is back and is in Lesbians with the Ice Mummy Alice. Very futuristic. I approve. Instead of 999's more compact complementary approach to feeding you weird theories, VLR instead goes from the central principle of the morphic field being real and starts doing all kinds of things with it. The highlight element, and likely the first major twist in the game, would be in the voting part of the game. After every escape room, everyone comes back to the ambidex rooms to vote ally or betray. You know, prisoner's dilemma stuff. But since Signia over here has the power to hop timelines, he can vote ally against... Alice, why not? And she betrays you. Oh no! So now you can go back and vote betray and she... Wait. This is good. The thing that makes VLR so captivating to me. What you think you can understand from 999's structure is turned on its head here and pushed forward. And while that's going to end up being a mixed bag ultimately, the ambition and vision is clear. We know what we're playing with now, so let's play with it. This is also why the characters start to represent ideas more from this point on. Luna is a character that has a narrative purpose in the story, and that she's supposed to be something of a mystery until you learn that she's a robot, and that recontextualizes a lot of events as they go down, etc., etc. But she's also the one who explains the Asimov's 3 laws of robotics to Sigma when he come hands all over the place. If you're my boss or you're my parents, you mishurt. She is also the Chinese room argument in that as a computer with a programmable response to things, she isn't truly thinking the way that everybody else in the game is. She has learned to essentially mimic human connection, and even though her imitation seems largely immaculate, it's theoretically irrelevant to the reality of the character. Some things go deeper still, but the bigger question going on here, which is the Schrodinger's cat stuff. See, here's Phi explaining it to Sigma a lot. Wow, did you know Sigma is cursed to have cat puns by a witch, and then they drop that until it's brought up again here just so he can talk silly while being explained essentially quantum theory at? But the point here is that as the cat can only become alive or dead once observed, the morphic field effectively gives Sigma and Phi infinite means to go back and adjust the outcome, though the outcome cannot be fully predicted. That makes VLR more unreliable a narrative line than 999, but here's where Ichikoshi's trick really comes into play. See, by now, we're several weird twists and reveals deep. I feel comfortable telling you this, but these games are very invested in twist reveals that you can, by extreme technicality, retrofit onto the data you already knew about the game. Back when I was studying playwriting in the 1700s, we were taught the difference between a twist and what was called a perception shift by our teachers. The former is something unexpected, sudden, shocking, but not able to be expected or predicted, with my instructors usually citing M. Night Shyamalan films as the standard. I can't believe the only 2 Shyamalan films I've seen are Sixth Sense and Last Airbender. Huh. Perception shifts, in contrast, are big, shocking reveals, but they are ones that you can then go back through your knowledge of the story and piece back together. We were taught that these are basically always better. I have long since abandoned dogmatic approaches to anything in art, and maybe that's for the best because Ichikoshi really stress tests these things. Did you know Sigma's an old man? Has been all game. The only time you see a picture of him in a cinematic is at the beginning when he's been kidnapped, but once you learn that your consciousness has effectively been shot 45 years into the future into your old man Sona, you can technically go back through and realize that every mirror in the game, should you click on them, was described as, quote, too dirty to see anything in. Also, Quark talks to old guys the same way, but it may not be immediately apparent because the only other old man here is Tenmyoji, which we learn now is Junpei's last name. Our goat's back, everyone! There is a playful delight in the series keeping you on your toes. Clover is back and looks maybe a little older, sure, and Alice is here. Oh, right, hey, Alice also isn't a mummy. That red herring turned real in 999 has been returned to a red herring emblematic of everything else going on here, but look, Junpei and Akane are olds now. Clover and Alice were just in cryo sleep along with Phi. Also, they make a big to-do about this being a desert. Like, the first time you managed to peek outside, but you're actually on the moon, and most of the population of Earth has died because of the virus everyone's infected with. In the way that 999 pulled back the curtain by the end to reveal that all of this was essentially preordained, the sheer existence of Akane alive here and now predetermines the existence of this nonary game because it has to happen so Junpei can help her solve the puzzle 10 years ago. The curtain is pulled back here to reveal that all of this has happened to work out the mechanics of not just a morphic field hopping from one timeline to the next, but to use those mechanics to essentially swap brains with current old man Sigma and past dumbass Sigma, because there's this other facility where the whole situation happened, where the outbreak of Radical 6 started, where Sigma lost his arms, where he agreed to work with Akane to try to stop this whole thing from happening. Okay, so this is also where things get weirder, because VLR is kind of a lot of things, trying to do a lot of things with its more expansive scope, its interest in application of a core mechanic, and this grandiose apocalyptic story. It is also the middle child of a trilogy now, self-consciously so. It was made with the full knowledge that there are plans to pick this up in a third game, and to its credit, it doesn't pull punches or keep a whole lot of secrets about itself for the next game. Just a couple of big ones at the end, what with the Come Hand and the Mystery Facility. These ambitions, I do think, strain the game a lot. It's much bigger, the scope of it more expansive, and when things finally click together, the game is maybe at the peak of the trilogy. These characters all feel well put together as characters. The scope puts Akane and Sigma in a really morally precarious situation, but not one that upends them. But it is also spending a lot of time in the muck of it all. I have some friends who do have complaints about how slow the game is, and while I didn't mind it that much, I do at least understand that you spend a lot of this game in a no-trust situation with everyone. Sigma gets screwed over by basically everyone in the story, and because of the new mechanic added, where you're voting in between each escape room, it feels like you're constantly being asked to just engage in horrible shit all the time. You get betrayed, you betray others, Fi speaks really angry Latin at you, and it takes a long time to dig yourself out of this filth before everything starts to come together and you get your sweet last reward. Fi kicking Dio. Look at her go. In this measure, the current final installment, Zero Time Dilemma, does fix this. It is a pretty short, breezy game. Gone is the first perspective through one main character. Now you're zooming cinematically all around this new cast of 4 familiar faces and 5 new freaks. Junpei, Akane, Sigma, and Fi return, looking weirder in their new art style. But I'm going to defend that because I think it's cute that each game has a very distinct aesthetic quality, even if, in my opinion, they kind of get uglier as the series progresses. They're joined now by Carlos, toxic bisexual cuckoldry enthusiast, Diana, who's here to have a comically bad time later, Yoko Taro, here to remind me that I gotta make those Nier videos, Eric, the worst man you know, and Mira, the worst woman you know, but unfortunately, as a feminist and an ally, I have no choice but to support this.
This person really, truly loved me.
Yeah, in a surprise twist, the cast has changed ever so slightly in tone here. Let's recap really quick. 999 has a trim cast of 8 people, some a little quirky but most highly motivated, playing effectively a long-form game of chess against their abusers while keeping Junpei in the dark as much as possible. VLR has Sigma, who is a bit of a lech, getting weird and inappropriate over Fi, Clover, Luna, and Alice. Not very progressive of you guy. Dio sucks, but he's kind of the villain of the story, so it's whatever. And beyond that, the cast is... well, okay, I wouldn't call them flat. They're all interesting enough characters. They have their oddities for sure, but it really isn't until ZTD that the cast really starts to sink into the filth. Oh yeah, filth is back. You are stuck with 4 genuine freaks, a baby Yoko Taro, and 4 returning castmates, but at maybe their worst personal selves. Like, Akane and Junpei are here to bicker, to test the waters on whether or not Carlos is going to cuck one of them. Junpei's become morbid, angsty, drinks habitually, and sure, it's an extension of being essentially pulled into Akane's bizarre world in the effort to try and find her, but he is no longer the chipper he-him lesbian-coded dork from 2 games ago, nor is he the jaded but reliable old man from less than 2 games ago. Sigma and Fi seem on the surface mostly okay until you reach one of the worst scenes in video game writing maybe ever.
When you were married, your husband often resorted to beating you.
Sigma, no!
He was
What
an
are you
alcoholic.
doing?
He drank to his eyeballs, was always gambling, and would laugh while he kicked and punched you. For no reason. He'd ask you for money.
Why did they have
sex.
to kill Yuri like
And if
this?
you said no.
It's a game that seems to be making one extremely bold swing with itself, and I think I can understand why they did so. See, much in the way that VLR doesn't want to merely mimic 999, therefore it's like 3 times as long and has a voting system that's outwardly hostile to you, ZTT doesn't just want to be VLR 2, right? But what does it do with that? It is already a continuation of the previous title in a way that VLR categorically wasn't, for taking place 45 years after 999 and also 45 years after ZTD for that matter. Here, we are picking up in the exact place suggested by the end of VLR, in this facility where an extremely high cunt Zero starts us off with a coin flip.
Pick red.
It's blue.
So I think one of the potential pushbacks to my whole ZTD goes off the rails and shoots for bizarre melodrama may be that it's an obvious intentional move here. More than ever, this is the Zero Escape game that cares the most about its characters' struggles and dramas. Most every dramatic reveal or backstory in the previous games were still potent, sure, still emotionally rich and all that, but they were also puzzle pieces gently sliding around the board until things fit together. It's a slide puzzle in this example. Zero Time Dilemma does a similar thing, but the balance has shifted in a way that's a little more sensational, a little more personal, and yet, when I played through it,
D-Team, Diana.
I killed, he fucking killed a kid with a grenade launcher. So, okay, I have been told that in what is now Lost Media, my 999 streams with friend of the channel, St. Rawberry, I was highly emotionally invested in the cast. I was terrified of hurting people, of making the wrong decisions, which does sound like me. This is why I've never done Renegade and Mass Effect. Hell, I pretended to be Elon Musk and still tried to justify a way to be mostly Paragon. That idea crossfaded through VLR, and by the time I got to ZTD, I became kind of a monster. Time to decide. Just immediately mashes that fucking thing.
What?
You didn't even wait! What happened? I would like to note two things here. Firstly, that my reaction to these games runs kind of counter to Danganronpa, the Titanic to our decon here, and that despite Danganronpa almost explicitly textually trying to pull you away from an emotional catharsis with the cast, Zero Escape, a series that earnestly loves interpersonal melodrama, has made me into a heartless beast. The other thing to highlight is that this is a purely mechanical relationship with the games themselves. See, Uchikoshi is an ambitious person, writing pretty earnestly about some high-concept theories and pseudosciences, but in a way that encourages a direct interaction with them. You have to essentially get more or less every choice in each game to get to the end, and in knowing that each game ended the same way, or hell, even the pretty stalwart confidence in guessing that ZTD would end the same way, despite the core mechanic of this game being that 6 people have to die to get all the passwords to escape, I became weirdly heartless about everything. Setting Phi on fire, melting teams in acid, blowing up Sigma, killing Yuri, killing Yoko Taro over and over and over and over and over again because, well, that's the game. It's like if in order to unlock the secret true ending of Mass Effect, you had to play it as both Paragon and Renegade. Neither choice would have that kind of emotional stake to it. They're just parts of the process of playing them. This is also what I've been told the experience is like when you try to get both the Pacifist and No Mercy endings in Undertale, and going back to do a Snowgrave playthrough in Deltarune, two things I refuse to do because I don't have to. Is this a criticism of Zero Escape? Well, I would argue that most of the time, this kind of shoots the moon, and absent an empathetic connection to the cast, the games kind of get into your head. You're now, instead, wrapped up in solving things and figuring out what you can extract from bad endings, what codes to have Robbery write down for you, or your friend Snall to code break before we got there, like that one time in VLR. He'll know which one. You start to engage with the game like the game is one giant complex escape room, not just the ones you're made to do, but an escape room of branching realities where keys and passwords and hints are dealt your way in blood and lives and... Wait, who's this old guy? Okay. Look, I enjoyed the fuck out of ZTD. I do also think it's the weakest of the trilogy, but by a really slim margin. I think that it really does boil down to one reveal. See, this Yoko Taro child, technically, that's Sean, and he's kind of not playing, and he is also a robot, and Q, the named character on the Q team, is an old guy that has just sort of been right out of frame this whole time. When this reveal happened, I was told that there have been signs peppered through that the game was never called the Nonary game, but the Decision game, and that Deca, that's old for 10. And I do get it, and Q is ultimately kind of a camp villain, but I think it does kind of taint this. The other reveals, the clever bracelet number trick with Akane, the Oldsma reveal, there's a certain amount of it that feels more connected, more a part of the experience. It feels right that these bizarre reveals come out in a way that the Q reveal kind of doesn't. It's too mechanical, a little too forced to feel that kind of earned. And paired with him having a new power that's just been sort of suggested in like 2 scenes maybe, on top of canonizing the morphic field jumping with a shift acronym, it all feels a little too, I guess, sensational, for lack of a better term. It's a little too much like they're trying to turn everything into a showstopper. Heightened character dramas, bizarre powers that have punchy names, a villain that's this old guy who's also Phi's twin brother because there's a fax machine in this game, but for people and timelines. It doesn't count as a twist if we're going back to playwriting school, but it does feel a little cheap. And that does it a disservice, because the heightened cinematic freak energy nature of this game did a lot to elevate it beyond the other games. 999 was probably always going to be the most consistent of the trilogy, but ZTD has this drama factor to it. Instead of a hopeless mire, you're on a nightmare roller coaster. Almost every escape room is you constructing the horrible trap you're going to be a part of now. Set a room on fire so that the fire safety gas displaces the oxygen enough that 2 of you will die. Unlock the ambidex room, where no matter what you choose, it will end in a bacchanal of bloodshed. God, Carlos and Junpei need to kiss. There is a hopelessness to ZTD, which is the part of the game that is a triumph. Chaos theory is this game's central mechanic, the idea that seemingly trivial things happen and cause unforeseen and grand consequences. Because of a snail, most of the world will die. In a way, it feels like this is an escape room that was made by all of the players. No one had any choice but to be here and do these horrible things and find some way out of this nightmare. And I guess that brings me back around to my particular fave. My human Sona herself. There's this scene in ZTD that I called right away as something I would latch onto. It is during one of the failed timelines, the one that leads to VLR, which, as a fun aside, in keeping with tradition, ZTD renders all of VLR a game set in a doomed timeline. Isn't that fun? But it's this scene where Zero suggests to Akane and Junpei that there will be a meeting held by Free the Soul, a terrorist group that the main villain of VLR is from, and that he suggests that they show up. Akane says flatly to him that she will never do so, and Zero responds that he's certain that she will, and yeah, that is kind of the appealing poison of these games. I would say that more than any drama, more than his own special brand of games for perverts, Uchikoshi's real strength on display here is in bending a game around a central mechanic, and that mechanic in turn sinking into you. Of course Akane will go to this meeting. This is a game where, when characters like her are presented with a choice, there is inevitably a reality where any of the given options are selected. At the end of this series, its wild highs, its kind of painful lows, the game's mechanical perspective has been enforced into my brain now. And that is kind of a remarkable feat all in its own. I can at least see things on the scale Akane has. There's this video around Akane being the world's worst heroine, according to an interview Uchikoshi made that wasn't properly cited, which is annoying really only to me, who's trying to find a source more reliable than the Zero Escape fan wiki saying it happened, also unsourced. Taking it on its word that these are real quotes, that Uchikoshi went to Zero Escape trying to make a heroine that does horrible things but retains her purity or whatever, I think there's something more that ended up happening. Akane's morals, her purity, whether or not she's a good person, feels in a way almost arbitrary. I can understand how you can have fun toying with Akane in your head as a moral actor, whether or not her decision to pull all of these people through these horrible games, whether or not her efforts to undo Delta's plot to wipe out most of the world to save it from a total extinction is good or moral or just or whatever, but it all ultimately feels kind of moot. Uchikoshi's made an almost anti-narrative in this trilogy of games. For as much as I am fond of any given character in any given part, for as interesting as the drama can be, for as outrageous as it can get, I do end up feeling thoroughly like Akane here. I can really only see the totality of the thing before me. That Akane exists at all, that she does anything in these games, is predestined. Under that lens, it makes the conversation of her actions feel meaningless. She has, through the logical stretching of the world she exists in, done every choice, made every decision she can make in such critical moments, and we're only seeing the ones that have worked out, the ones that intersect with our 5 points of view. If Kodaka is bringing in his character work, contributing to 100 Line a cast of characters that are the extreme endpoints of old, bizarre tropes, his own fresh brand of sickening weirdos, Uchikoshi is going to put them through the blender. I will not spoil how this applies in 100 Line just yet, but it is a massive component in it, part of the big advertised reveal of its 100 possible endings. I mean, like, obviously, right? But I think that part of what makes 100 Line such a captivating title is in the push and pull these two writers are bringing to the project. It's not a matter of two perspectives like clashing or blending, but I think it is in the constant tension between them. In almost every way, 100 Line is these two series, but heightened and focused for good and ill, as we will see next month. It's not the end of the trilogy yet. Like, what am I supposed to give up the best reveals here and now? Also, I haven't finished 100 Line yet, so, Special thanks to Alex Patanos, Alexi Angelica, Athena Stripes, Bees Louise, Blair Renix, Blueberries in My Coffee, Colleen T, Evan Kearns, Foxy Hex, Gail Simmons, Grizz, Lewis Wells, Low Res, Maria Aladren, Michael McNay, Mirai the Redmarked, Noun Verbally, Philip Pryor, Professor Bopper, Rob Leon, Saint Rawberry, Some Kind of Dog, Sunny Haven, Trade Good, Trinant, TV's Ross, and Zetetic. Thank you all so much.
For no reason.